Balancing order and chaos and the zone of proximal development. I don't really know where this is going to go. I just want to talk about it as a reminder to myself, these are things I need to be doing, and not necessarily in the context of needing to work something out, even though it's kind of the same thing, but it's not like I'm looking for a specific answer, yet I'm hoping to find one anyway, or a couple, or more questions that will lead to more progress. Because it's just been reframed for me in a certain way, and me being reminded of this being a thing. People talk about the zone of proximal development with childhood development a lot, and with learning certain things, whether it be learning motor skills or even just vocabulary and other things, and usually people talk about it with younger children. And it's a thing that doesn't stop. It doesn't have to stop. It's not a thing that, oh, you're 12 now, so this doesn't apply to you. I mean, it's a mechanism, and if you don't know what it is, I guess I'll tell you about it as I kind of talk about it more for my own sake. The zone of proximal development is just a certain an area, like a figurative space wherein it is more where productivity, no, how do I phrase this? Why didn't I think of this before? It is a figurative space wherein learning occurs best. But also, there's this thing about balancing order and chaos, which we're going to get into as well. But I mean, it's the space where, especially when it comes to children, where they need guidance in order to learn. Where there's only so much that, a child can learn on their own through their own experiences of, I'm going to, trial and error this thing into a learning experience. Obviously, that's probably not very often a conscious effort, but more of something they're just doing subconsciously. And this is the area where, we talk about scaffolding in education all the time. Like, how can we help someone? How do we help a student without giving them the answer, right? How do we set them up for success and give them steps, to follow without giving them too much, because then they're not learning anything if we give them too much. And if you don't give them enough and they're just stuck spinning their wheels, they're not learning anything there either. So the zone of proximal development, again, is an area, a figurative space, an area wherein learning occurs at the highest rate, I guess, wherein someone can balance. Again, usually, especially when we're talking about children, it is where the mentor, the adult, the more experienced, whatever, the teacher can balance the degree of difficulty so that the student or learner, in this case, can grasp onto it and actually achieve a understanding of whatever concepts are being presented. And what I mean by understanding is not memorization or learning things by rote, but a true understanding of something so the concept is understood, whatever that may be. Some of it, I guess, has to be memorization if we're talking about vocabulary, wherein we can say, even if we just talk to younger people frequently, we adjust how we would speak to them versus how we would speak to other adults our age or cognitive ability that matches relatively closely, that we sometimes subconsciously speak to people differently, and very consciously we speak to people differently as well with different vocabulary, because we may be aware that some people may not be able to understand what we're saying, which defeats the purpose of communication in general. So when people are learning, though, and we are aware that people are learning things, or we're maybe in a mode, whether it be conscious or subconscious, to speak to people who don't have the same cognitive ability, whether it be because just of maturity and age or because other factors, then we can, again, consciously and subconsciously alter things such as our communication style and our speech in order to put that person in the zone of proximal development. Rather than me speaking to someone with a whole bunch of words they're not understanding, and them not even, sometimes they don't even understand that they don't understand, so they don't even ask, what does that mean? Or if you're overwhelming somebody with a whole thing of, if you use one word in a set of instructions to someone where they don't know what it means, they, at a certain age and maturity level, would ask you, what does that mean? And then you're like, oh yeah, that means this. And you're like, okay, well, again, if you bombard them with 20 words they don't know, at all, then it'll be like, hey, I didn't understand any of that. And you're like, well, which part didn't you understand? And then you strip it apart, and that's too much at once. Whereas, again, if you're talking to somebody, again, with intention, or maybe subconscious or implicit intention, where you want them to learn, but you are just simply talking to them way under their maturity level, they're not getting anything out of that conversation. And sometimes they don't need to, but other times, obviously, they do. And that goes with learning anything. And again, not just children, or not just people that have a lower cognitive ability than average, or people who are not neurotypical. But this is something that I've been thinking about today as applying to myself, which is why I wanted to get into this. That the zone of proximal development, and along with balancing order and chaos, are things that I need to focus on more. And things that now that I'm reflecting, I'm like, oh, this is exactly how I do that, and this is how I don't do that, and how do I do that? And I guess that's where I'm trying to work things out. Because it's something that I think a lot of people would be more benefited by if they were taught these things explicitly in their youth, in their young adulthood, to figure out the balance of order and chaos. And what I mean by that is that if you are continually in a state of order and you don't face many challenges or conflicts, then you are not growing or learning. And I mean, life puts a lot of those things in the way for us, but also we need to be doing that to ourselves, to be finding the balance on this line of order and chaos, and not wanting to be on either side, but, if this line was a wall, you want to be, standing on that wall of both of these fields of order and chaos, and not falling into either one, but just walking along it as best you can and balancing, because that is how you are going to, grow and get to where you want to be or where you need to be. So again, if things are in too much order, you aren't challenging yourself, and that's obvious. Or you're trying to control the situation too much to the point where you maybe, unless controlling your own learning is part of that, but I mean, if you're trying to control situations to a certain degree and have so much order, and completely, there's certain conflicts we don't want, right? There's certain conflicts that we try to control the order of events so that we don't end up in conflict, because that sometimes hinders ability to learn in a way, because it provides us, or it doesn't provide us with opportunities to do things we need to do or want to do, because we're busy dealing with conflict that's unnecessary and it's a waste of time. There's some conflicts that we're not going to learn a lot from, because we already know those things and whatever else. So there's a certain amount of control. Obviously, it's not like you want a whole bunch of conflict in your life for unnecessary purposes, because that would be chaos, right? I want to give some specific examples of things I've kind of reflected on in my own life, and also things I need to reflect on right now to figure out how can I figure out that zone of proximal development for myself and balance the order and the chaos in order to create a line, I guess, that I could walk of moving forward and learning and being constructive and, engaging my growth mindset to do these things and actually come up with some products. It's a lot of pushing that needs to happen. You need to push the order, I guess push it away, but I mean also just figure out where your line is. Where will you fall into the, how hard do you have to push in order to fall into the field of chaos, and then back that off a bit, right? With certain things, though, I mean, that's really difficult. So if I think of mountain biking as an example that I was thinking of earlier, what does chaos mean when mountain biking? It probably means that every time I go out, I'm going to get wrecked. And that's not good, not just for my physical health, but for the sake of my bike, for the sake of me wanting to go out again. If I'm not, if I break a leg, then I can't continue doing that activity and pushing myself for quite some time because I have to heal. If I wreck my bike, then it's going to cost me money, and then it's going to that might hinder me from being able to do that activity again for a long time. So being too reckless and falling into the field of chaos in that example would, be pushing yourself too hard so that you are constantly, continually, habitually, often, frequently getting wrecked and having crashing and or falling off things or whatever, right? So there's a balance there where you have to have a certain amount of order, and you realize I have these skills and ability that I'm very confident in, and these are things that I would like to get better in. And if you are doing it right, yes, you're going to have close calls and or crash from time to time. That has to be an acceptable amount for you, because without that at all, if you were just riding and never crashing and never having a close call, never getting wrecked, then you are obviously in the field of order much too much. And it's playing it way too safe in order to enjoy that activity, or in order to, no, I shouldn't say that, in order to progress at that activity, whatever that activity is, but in this case mountain biking, if you want to, again, if you have goals that you want to accomplish, like I would like to do these trails faster, and that involves a whole bunch of skills, right? I would like to be able to climb better, I would like to, whatever, right? Like, there are so many things, and certain things that I want to do and certain things I don't want to do, or just like, whether it be like jumping, for example, it's like, there's no way for me to get better at it without trying, obviously, and there needs to be steps there. And if I'm so afraid of getting wrecked, which with jumping I certainly am, because I almost guarantee that it'll happen. And part of the reason is because I feel like I can't find baby steps that are baby enough for me to scaffold myself into a situation where I feel somewhat comfortable. Because that opportunity isn't really readily available, or I haven't made my own jumps that I feel like, okay, this is acceptable, and then I'll find one that's a little bigger and a little bigger. I have to use or work with what I have. It's really stopped my growth. And I need, in order to, because this is an area I want to get better in, I don't know about excel in, but it's an area that I want to get better in for many reasons, because it would be more fun if I was confident in that. I could go faster. There are times where I have to brake when I don't necessarily want to, because I'm like, oh, there's a drop here, there's a jump, there's a thing that I need to go around, or that I have to stop and get off my bike, and that's not fun for me. But also, being reckless isn't fun either. So there has to be a point where I have to seek that out, that appropriate balance, so that I don't step into the field of chaos. And also, if I still have both feet in the field of order, I am not engaging a practice which will propel me forward to getting better at that thing. So that's kind of one example there. I was also thinking about art, and I was like, well, what would be chaos? What is the field of chaos with art? And it could go a couple ways, I guess. And one is that if I'm continually pushing myself to do new things, creating art sometimes, most times for most people, and what most people think of art, is pretty low risk. So I'm not too afraid of hurting myself. However, you can really financially set yourself back if you are, you know what, I'm going to try oil paints, and then you just buy all the oil paints ever and all the things that you want, and then you realize, I don't like oil paints, or they're so difficult right now, or whatever it is. Or maybe you don't like it because it's difficult, or maybe you just use it and realize, I actually don't like the medium. Like, it's not something I want to do with my artistic practice. You put yourself into a field of chaos there by financially setting yourself back so much that you can't use and allocate those funds towards something that you would like to pursue and experiment with and get better with. Because what if I said, oh, okay, well, let me try, I'll just get 2 oil paints and try this out a little bit and realize, oh, no, I don't like them. Maybe I'll try watercolor, and then you do the same thing with that. You're like, whoa, I really like this, and I want to develop this skill, and you could allocate the funds towards that rather than buying a set of, 20 oil paints right off the bat and then having to figure out what to do with them and putting yourself in a field of chaos. That's one thing. But also, I feel like for me it's difficult to push myself too hard with experimentation. So it's something that you could do, because like I said, if you're trying a new medium and you want to experiment with that, and if you don't do it fast, or if you don't do it slow enough and you do it too fast, like me talking and screwing that up, then I mean you can't allocate those funds elsewhere, so that becomes a problem. But I think that sometimes if you experiment too much or too hard, I guess, if you don't have any order to what you want to accomplish and you're just throwing things around and grabbing things left and right without any thought, really, then what are you pushing towards? You are in a state of chaos. And a little bit of chaos, or I guess the balance of chaos and order, which we're trying to achieve, is good, is okay, because you might make those, Bob Ross moments, those happy little accidents that only happen when you push yourself. But you're pushing yourself generally to a certain point to do a specific thing. What is that thing? And if you don't know what that thing is, it's kind of difficult to actually go anywhere. You're just being chaotic for no reason, and I don't think that the results generally are good. For example, I mean, I've gone from too much order to chaos and back to a little bit of order and resolved a peace. There's been times where I've been trying to do something and I had a goal in mind, but I had too much of a goal in mind. There was too much order. And it wasn't working out because it wasn't present enough in my emotional state sometimes, especially with abstracts, and it just wasn't resolving. It wasn't working visually. It wasn't resolving with what balances optically and the composition. It just didn't work. So I put myself in that, actually put me in a state of some chaos where I was overwhelmed with the fact that this was not working. And I used that chaos to my advantage to completely change the piece in its concept, but also in its physical value by, I don't mean value as in monetarily, but I mean just like if it was a board or wood or canvas, and within that state of chaos, I experimented and pushed it to a different place by altering it so drastically without a lot of thought, but using more emotion, again, balancing these things of like logic reasoning versus emotion and just process, where I, threw it against a wall or burned it or punctured it or whatever I did. That momentarily put it in a state of chaos, which I was able to then slow down after a while and then balance out with some more order and resolve it. Sometimes, especially with doing collabs, as Randy and I have done a couple times, I feel like it starts out in a little bit of order. Let's get some texture down here, let's make sure that it's balanced in the composition well. And what's going to be a background color? Okay, let's get some music. All that is a healthy amount of order. And then we get into a healthy amount of chaos, where what we do is we start putting colors there. And just like, I don't know, it just needs this, I guess. Okay, well, maybe this. And then, an abstract piece just responds to everything that was done before it. And so there's a little bit of chaos, especially in the beginning stages, which might be like the first half hour to an hour of like, we just need something here. It doesn't matter what it is right now. I mean, something, and then here's something else, and then okay now, and then you get to a certain point where the decisions you make are much more orderly and much more calculated and slower and well thought out in order to resolve the piece. You can't just have it be so chaotic and be like, oh, it's done. There's times where you work with chaos so much artistically, depending on what kind of work you do, that it becomes orderly. I can think of some abstracts that I've done, especially with spray paint, a very fast-moving medium, quick drying, and it's just, it lends itself to speed as well as, like, I guess, a speed and coverage, quick coverage, thick, and just whatever. It just lends itself to a certain style of painting that chaos can ensue in great ways. If you do that a lot, and you work with that medium a lot, and certain styles a lot, things become muscle memory, and you kind of know what to do in certain cases, and that's great up to a certain point, where that chaos has been practiced enough, and again, this type of chaos is very low risk, so it's been practiced enough that you can, it becomes somewhat orderly, and then when it becomes too orderly, then you need to introduce a different type of chaos to balance it out, because then it's too orderly, it's too formulaic, too much muscle memory, and the resolution doesn't satisfy you anymore. So that's another thing. I guess those are just two examples that I wanted to talk about for my own sake on how to push myself and balance order and chaos more. obviously these things apply to so many things. Just balance has been a theme in my life for so freaking long. I feel like it's a stupid thing to say because it's the theme in everyone's life, I feel, but it's been a very conscious thing that I've just noticed since I don't know when, sometime in early university, if not before then, so early 20s, if not before then, that obviously balance is the most important thing, but it's balance in all areas, and this is just one I wanted to talk about in this thing of, the zone of proximal development. We, like I said, often talk about someone who is older trying to affect change, positive change, and assist someone who is younger, and that's a child or whatever. But the zone of proximal development is something that doesn't stop. It's something that exists for learning purposes, period. And if you are to grow and learn and progress, then you would want to perhaps put yourself in a position where you are seeking out someone who has more knowledge than you, right? Like where someone who knows how to instruct and teach you and be a mentor. And sometimes you don't necessarily have that option, or the thing that needs to be done is through your own experience. And the things I just talked about, both of them can be done in both of those ways, I feel. Where I could have someone in my life that maybe I go mountain biking with them, or I ask them things, which I do have someone that I can actually ask certain things to. Sometimes it's about fixing my bike. Sometimes it's about certain things with riding, and it's okay, they have way more experience. They can teach me some things. If we were actually here together in person, they might be able to judge this jump. I think you can handle. I know you're scared of it, but this is I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna show you what happens, and you can see me in the air, or whatever, right? And that fits into the zone of proximal development. And again, order and chaos. And then having someone there might make me more confident in being okay, this isn't stepping into the realm of too much chaos. Because there is someone there to assist me if I get hurt, or to help me understand what is going to happen, or whatever. Give me steps to take so that I can see that the consequences won't be as dire, or whatever, or that there won't be a need for a consequence as much because I have enough education behind this thing that it's not as scary anymore. So it doesn't feel as chaotic, and I've got a foot on the side of order because of that person. If that doesn't exist, then it's something you've got to figure out yourself, which in some cases, when it comes to art, I'm generally pretty okay with doing. When it comes to mountain biking, there are some things I'm pretty okay at doing with that too. It's just the experience in itself has to fit into the zone of proximal development with pushing yourself and not having anyone there to tow you in, And again, with art, that's a thing too. You could obviously take art classes. There's always going to be someone who knows more than you, and you can get some tips and tricks from somebody, and they can teach you some things that you are not aware of, or it's something you're going to have to figure out yourself and push yourself to do. Both of those options are there, I think, for almost anything that I can think of, and obviously there's things that I can't think of because I don't freaking know everything. Anyway, that's my discussion about the zone of proximal development and balancing order and chaos for the purpose of progression and advancement. Good day.